All right, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam. The reason is because you guys are in the same place, so the sound will not be clear.
Assalamu alaikum.
Perfect. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
MashaAllah, tabarakallah. We're all into YouTube at the moment, alhamdulillah. So, subhanAllah, this is the last class, and I'm really excited to have both of you, Penabdul and Muhammad Abdallah. May Allah bless you for coming online. Today, inshallah, about a very important topic, and I think it's something that we need to really discuss. And I know, considering the fact that we had this class, alhamdulillah, we will come to the end of the class, so it is a relevantly timely topic to discuss. That is a necessity for intellectual pursuit. And just before we go a bit deeper into the discussion, I would like maybe Muhammad Abdallah, can you give us a highlight or a brief picture about intellectualism in Islam?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa salam taslima, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyul azim. You guys can hear me clearly, right?
Yeah.
No, yeah, we can hear you.
Alhamdulillah. So I think briefly, if you look at the world today, Muslims have the claim to one of the biggest contributors to intellectual pursuits, be it in any, I think, respectable, progressive field in sciences or even arts in some cases. So Islam, in the Quran, we have our foundations, and there are verses in the Quran that promote knowledge from first principles. So for instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, are they equal, those who know and those who don't? And then, of course, you have other verses like in Surah Mujadila, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمُ مِنْكُمْ دَرَجَاتٍ, that Allah will raise those who believe amongst you and those that are given knowledge to a high degree. So Muslims from day one have endeavored to progress in any field that is suitable for humanity. And I often say this, if the Nobel Peace Prize was given back, saying from the 8th century up to the maybe mid 14th century, Muslims will take all of it, whether it's in science, medicine, particularly physics, ophthalmology, chemistry, and you name it. So Islam has had a flourishing, I think, span, and it has contributed to the foundations of all sciences in humanity. And I think we're benefiting from it today, despite, a lot of us not knowing the sources of this thing. So Islam has been a progressive religion. The Prophet ﷺ, there is a hadith, it's not authentic, but the scholars say ma'nahu sahih, the meaning is authentic. The Prophet ﷺ apparently said, but we know it's a weak hadith, but just take on the meaning, that al-hikmatu dallatul mu'min fa'anna wajadaha or فَحَيْثُ وَجَدَهَا فَهُوَ أَحَقُّ بِهَا, that wisdom is the stray camel of the believer. Wherever they or he finds it, he's more worthy of it. So Muslims have understood that from day one and have taken advantage of the meetings they had with the Greeks. They took all the Hellenistic sciences, including medicine, and expanded on it and gave it more meaning, and it was more profound and it was more beneficial for humanity. So again, from a spiritual perspective, I would say finally, there's no doubt that Muslims have guarded their faith from day one. I mean, the amounts of books that Muslims have authored in defense of, or not defense, in the protection of their religion so that it doesn't get blemished, say like the Jewish texts or the Christian texts, which we all know about, the canonical changes that happen in the conferences that people held, like the Nicene Conference. Muslims have never experienced such trauma in their existence. I mean, Islam has always been guarded. So that's what I see when I look at the brief when I give a brief picture of intellectualism. Perhaps that's what I see, though it's not the same thing. But I think we'll get to that, inshallah.
Oh, mashallah, tabarakallah. That was a beautiful one, Muhammad Abdallah. Penabdul, let's hear from you. What do you think?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we've had what Muhammad said with regards to the Islamic perspective on knowledge. Well, we can conveniently say that we are more deserving to be called a people of knowledge than any other nation in this world, because we're a nation of knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, Iqra. That was the first thing that was revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And alladhi allama bil qalam. Again, in the same thing, well, read, then qalam, the one that is taught by the pen. So by reading and by writing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a concise introduction to what Islam is all about, that Islam is all about knowledge. And as Muhammad Abdallah said, the earlier Muslims understood this concept that Islam is basically built on knowledge, not emotions, but on knowledge. And that is why in Surah Yusuf, verse 108 or thereabout, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says regarding, khitaban li nabiyyi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allah says, Qul, say to them, Hadihi sabili ad'u ila Allah. This is my path, and I call unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ala basiratin, from an informed perspective with knowledge. From an informed perspective with knowledge. Qul hadihi sabili ad'u ila Allah ala basiratin ana wa man ittaba'ani. I and those who follow me. And we are the followers of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if everything is based on knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has raised the status of the people of knowledge. We can see that reality proves us right with respect to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala favors the people of knowledge. Then we know that Islam, it's where the Muslims are more deserving to be given this attribute of knowledge. And unfortunately, we are where we are today. And as Muhammad Abdallah rightfully said, we hope that one day, inshallah, we will be there, because we were there once upon a time. We were there. The earlier civilization bear testimony to the genius of the intellectuals that Islam, that graced the annals of Islamic history. And even today, the modern world, owes a lot to the early Muslim intellectuals that made giant strides in various fields. So I think as Muslims, we already know that we don't need anyone to tell us about knowledge seeking and intellectual pursuit. We already know that our religion is entirely based on, deep thinking and intellectual journey, so to say. Now,
subhanAllah, what's really amazing, you guys made a very valid point where you are talking about how, Islam used to have glory in the sense that they were, most of the innovations were done by Muslims and the likes of it. And, when we go to school, these are stories that we've had people telling us, everyone is telling us about how the Muslim did this, how the Muslim achieved this and did that. But how did the Muslim, the Muslim dominate the intellectual world? How did that happen during that time? And then let's go with Muhammad Abdallah first, and then let's see what he will say.
As my beloved brother said, Muslims have always understood Islam from an intellectual perspective, because the Quran is inundated by verses saying, think deeply, ulul albab, the people of depth. Afalat taqilun, don't you understand? In other words, can't you intellectualize? and it's revealed in Arabic for the process of intellectualization. That's the aim of the Quran, actually being revealed in Arabic. Muslims were, I think, historically, not anymore to a large extent. I think it can be argued, but historically Muslims had jid. They were extremely serious people. Muslims had the capacity to sit and build institutions and train their children. The riyadatul awlad, the disciplining of the child of the past. I mean, if you read books written on these things, one example is by Sahnun. The capacity that they intended their children to reach was incredible, was beyond. I mean, look at a good example is just in fiqh, the Risala of Abu Zayd al-Qayrawani, which is actually written for children. It's a fiqh guide for children, and my beloved brother can confirm that. But now we find ourselves struggling to go through the text, and it's still a valid text, and adults are actually studying this book. So I think the standard that they had himma aliyah, they had high aspirations. Their struggle was to raise the religion, not just in the Sharia aspects of it, not that I wanted to say, maybe in the Aqidah aspects of it. They also wanted to raise the religion from a worldly perspective, so that the Muslims had the most comfortable lives. They had the most important offices in their vicinities. They had awqaf for different things, like, everybody was taken care of. I mean, I was reading I think it was Munqidh min al-Dalal by Imam al-Ghazali, and this is a book almost 1,000 years old, and he said something that was quite interesting. He described how the Baghdadi government at that time took care of its scholars, and he left for about 10 years, even though he had breaks, but everything he had was entirely taken care of, including his family, and that's the respect they had for scholars. Now, if you look at the situation now, it's a different thing, So I can say that they raised the standards. They were very efficient at what they did with regards to preserving knowledge and promoting it. I mean, final example I think I can give is Baytul Hikmah. The Caliph actually gave people what they translated into Arabic from any other language, the weight in gold of whatever it was they translated. And I think a good reference book for people to actually go back and read is The Lost History by Milton. It was written, I think, rather beautifully, describing all these things that happened and how the Islamic structure held. And of course, I think the foreword was actually written by His Majesty, the King of Jordan. So it's a good book, but I would really like to hear Penabdul's take on this.
Yeah, as you rightfully said, they raised the bar, and it's always difficult to attain the height they attained, but we can always aspire to be like them. And they were independent of outsiders. That was how they perfected knowledge. There was a lot of intellectual discourse amongst them. It was known in the field of religion, in the field of science, social science, and amazingly, Ibn Taymiyyah, in the time of Ibn Taymiyyah, they knew how to, cut open human body. You're talking about anatomy. So they had all this knowledge. Ibn Qayyim could explain the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and how the pattern of sleeping of the Prophet ﷺ and how that has to do with the position of the heart in the body. This goes to tell us that the knowledge, they understood that the most important knowledge was the knowledge of Sharia. And all the praises you find in the Quran is with respect to those that are gain the knowledge of Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. However, that knowledge is a precursor to any other knowledge that they had. And because of the reverence they had for the Quranic knowledge itself and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, they paid attention. They were very diligent in other aspects of knowledge. And that was why they excelled, and they were qudwa, they were role models for people to look up to. And the intellectualism was embedded in them. And amazingly, it will surprise a lot of people that, today when we talk about the aviation industry, the Wright brothers, come to mind in the aviation industry? Well, I can tell you that, amazingly, the first person to conceive the idea of an object flying was a Muslim scientist, Abbas bin Firnas. Abbas bin Firnas was the first person to conceive the idea of an aeroplane. But today, the credit goes to the Wright brothers, and as it is with so many things. So you had Muslims that excelled in various fields. They could tell you, and subhanallah, just 2 weeks ago, I was having a discussion with someone, and I said, the intellectual capacity of the Sahaba and those that came after them cannot be compared to ours. Today, we have to depend on the compass, for example, to be able to navigate our ways on the waves. And we also have to depend on the navigator on the aeroplane to be able to fly from one point to another. We are doing this with the aid of instruments, but you're talking about a people that we are using their intellectually endowed brain to understand the direction. They could move from point A to point B without the aid of compass, because they understood the knowledge. Well, the star, a particular star, this is the direction. That was the intellectual capacity that they developed. But again, we become intellectually lazy. But the earlier generation, Cordoba is there, Spain, the great history of Spain. The Muslims ruled over Spain for 800 years. The Muslims ruled over India for 1,000 years. And all of these years, they had domination in all fields of science, social science, economics, religious aspects, everything. They were the leaders in the world. But alas, as the Prophet ﷺ said, we went after this dunya and everything left us behind. And now here we are, consumer people, almost all Muslim nations today are only dependent on other people to produce so that they can make use of what they have produced. But that was not the case.
Subhanallah, Penabdul, this just opened our mind to the fact that, Muslim didn't just come with the deen and say, okay, fine, does the Sharia, but they also, the way you put the example of Abbas ibn Firnas, the person who invented or perhaps brought the idea of airplanes and light survey. It opens our mind to the fact that as Muslims, we are not just expected to say, fine, we're not going to become better in what we do on the light survey, but we can trace on the path of these people and what they have done to contribute to humanity at large. Now, this is not just being them contributing to Islam, they also contributing to humanity at large. But the question is this, and my question goes to Muhammad Abdallah: how did the Muslim, or what caused the Muslims to be left behind on the intellectual front today?
Well, it's very interesting when Penabdul spoke about the stars. I'm very curious about those things. And astronomy has been a big deal for Muslims. Without it, there wouldn't be modern navigation and stuff like that. And the main constellation of stars that the Muslims used for travel is the same that NASA still uses today. It's quite interesting. Muslims wouldn't find this out if they didn't read about it. For instance, like the three main stars, I know Al-Tayr, which I think I can show people when I've had somebody teach me how to navigate these things. And they call this star Al-Tayr, and then now in English it's called Al-Tair. And then there is Al-Dabaran, which now they call Al-Dabaran. And then you have Ibta al-Jawza, they call it the Betelgeuse. So Muslims sometimes go through these things without realizing they actually did the work. And I think Muslims, the reason why we're left behind is we didn't live up to the work that had been done by, say, the Salaf. And as Penabdul rightly said, the Sahaba, the capacity they had, the training they received from the Prophet was actually what caused this cataclysmic boom in the whole world, which was led by Muslims. And unfortunately, we lost it. You could argue it was because of the division, or it was because of the Crusaders disrupted the thing, and maybe when the Muslim lost Andalusia, which is now Spain, part of Spain, or many other things like the end of the last Islamic empire, which is the longest serving, the Ottoman, which I actually I'm quite very interested in. So the Muslims, I think, have lost due to so many things. I think one of the problems we have now is our level of analysis is very primitive. So we just tend to look at things from a very simplistic point of view. I would give this example, and I would allow Penabdul to say something here. I was talking to somebody that we mutually know, myself and Penabdul. It was Hadi who was telling me that he thinks that, say, the problem of Al-Majiri, which is very concerning, I think, to any responsible Nigerian, irrespective of religion. You know, the way we look at it is, well, we haven't yet even given them their full rights. We talk about them like they're lesser citizens. And so, for instance, if we want to solve that problem, do we solve it as, okay, these kids are just roaming about, get them to school, things like that? One of the things I think Hadi said that really was quite interesting. He said he thought that the problem was from the uncontrolled levels of divorce within the Ummah, so that if a man divorces a woman, most probably in a poor setting, she would have to send these kids to do tallah, which is selling things on the street, which is very detrimental, especially to the girls. And she would probably want to send others to other places to do bara, just begging. And these things are detrimental to our society. So this is a person trying to look at causes beyond just saying, oh, these kids, their parents are irresponsible. That's just you moralizing. What have you done to not make them that desperate enough to send their kids to places? You haven't talked about that. You're just talking about, you know, moral sentiments, or these people are just terrible people. Well, perhaps if you're in the same situation, you would do the same. So we have to start counting the costs. And I think Muslims stop doing that. And what we're doing often now is copying. So when you copy other things that are not originally yours and you can't navigate through them because of perhaps your cultural deficiency or whatever, and I don't mean our culture is deficient. What I mean is because your cultures don't match those cultures, then you're bound to have all these big holes and gaps, and then you become extremely mediocre because you're not being original, you're not striving for the sake of Allah, you're trying to copy somebody, and you're doing it very miserably. So I think the Muslims have lost a very deep capacity to analyze problems and are just maybe just tweeting about them.
What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think it's very instructive what my beloved brother has just, his submission is very instructive and quite, you know, a comparison. And I think when he mentioned the issue of copying, the statement of Abu Faraj ibn Jawzi comes to mind. He said, to imitate is to suspend the use of the intellect, whereas the intellect has been created for thinking and reasoning. Now, this is a respected scholar in the annals of Islamic history. Now, he understood that you have to employ your intellect to be able to understand and to know how you fit into the global politics and the world itself. So we lost it. We lost it. Muhammad Abdallah made mention of something that caught my attention, the issue of the Crusaders. We lost it actually when we were detached from our culture. And when I'm talking about culture here, I'm talking about Islamic culture. We lost it when we were detached from our Islamic culture. And that is what is affecting us up to date. We are suffering from inferiority complex. Now, the first thing that happened to us and that set the motion, the ball rolling, and everything just kept in motion, and now we are where we are, and you know, as backward people, was the fact that those that thought ahead of some of us now felt that the best way we can take these people backward is to detach them from their culture. Now, what was the first thing? They watered down the value of Arabic language. Most of these things we are talking about today were written in Arabic language. Most of the amazing scholars in Islamic history, some of them were not even Arabs. They perfected the language, they excelled in the language, and by at large, the Muslims benefited from it. But now, when your language of your cultural language, our culture is the Islamic culture, so the language is Arabic. When Arabic language has been watered down, and now the colonial master's language becomes the in thing. So today, it's affecting us today. You have to speak the Queen's English before someone can appreciate your intellectual capacity. Whatever you are saying, even if it is rubbish, as long as you speak well, wow, that guy is eloquent. Now, but the Arabic language that has, the capacity to, take us to cloud 9 intellectually has been watered down. So that was the first thing that affected the Muslims. When we started looking down on the language of Quran itself. So along the line, this knowledge that we're talking about today, the much celebrated knowledge of the yesteryears that we kept referencing became lost because they were in Arabic language. Now you have all of these things, the manuscripts are there, very few people can access what has been written, let alone knowing that whatever you are amazed, at today has been written maybe 1,000 years ago. I give you an example. To talk about the intellectual, capacity of the early Muslims, Imam al-Mawardi, he wrote a book, Al-Ahkam al-Sultaniyya, that talks about public administration and governance 1,000 years ago or thereabout. That book, nobody has written a more perfect book today. Even the so-called political scientists have not written a more detailed book like what Imam Mawardi wrote 1,000 years ago. But how many Muslims know that something like that on political science and a system of governance is there in Islam based on Quran and Sunnah with the intellectual insight of the Islamic scholar? Now, if we want to get back our lost glory, we have to go back and start appreciating what the Salaf did. Now, someone will be perplexed if a scientist from one of the European countries today comes up with something new, and he was told that, well, but Ibn Taymiyyah said this thing some years back. Like I was having a discussion with one of the people that was inclining to atheism, and he was telling me that there are a lot of mistakes in the Quran, and I invited him over. And one of the things he was bragging of was that he is a scientist, that is a geographer. And from his knowledge of geography, there are a lot of inconsistencies in the Quran with respect to geography. Subhanallah. When he said that, I picked Ibn Kathir. The verse he was referencing, Surah Al-Kahf, I picked Ibn Kathir. In the Arabic language, Ibn Kathir has dissected what he was confused about. And Wallahi al-Azim, I said, this was Ibn Kathir hundreds of years ago, talking about what you are confused about today. And he has explained it. And to Alhamdulillah, all praise to Allah, he became convinced by what Ibn Kathir wrote 800 years ago. And is saying that I'm a scientist. But because nobody picks Ibn Kathir with that insight to look at what has been written. But when you, now, unfortunately, so that we move to the next thing, where we are reading, the answers are not there. Where the answers are, we are not reading. And the Muslims are facing the backlash of backwardness. Now.
Penabdul, just before we go further, you made mention about Islamic culture and our culture. Do you think that Islam is becoming subordinate to our culture and that's affecting our intellectualism?
Yes, I think aptly put. The fact that we subject Islamic culture to our personal whims and our cultural baggages is the reason why the Muslims are where they are today. We don't appreciate the Islamic culture that we have. For example, what's the Islamic culture of greeting? Say Assalamu alaikum. Muslim of today, I'm not generalizing. Ta'mim lughat al-juhala. The Arabs would say generalization is the language of the the ignorant ones. At-ta'mim lughat al-juhala. So I'm not generalizing, but most of the Muslims that we interact with today, they feel inferior to showcase their Islamic culture. So they are better off showcasing a borrowed culture or suppressing in their thoughts, suppressing Islamic culture in order to give way to their own culture, because they feel the Islamic culture is backward. Why? This is again another thing of a ghazwatul fikr, intellectual warfare, mental warfare, that the Muslims have been conquered mentally, that they don't see anything good in what Islam brings, let alone talking about the Islamic knowledge. So people don't appreciate much of Islamic knowledge as they do with the Western knowledge. And I tell you this, in Medina, once I was shocked. In Medina, in the masjid of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, some young Medinite guys that were studying chemical engineering and another type of engineering from US, they came back that for Ramadan, and we met in Medina in the masjid of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, young guys like myself then, some 5 years ago, and we're having discussion. Do you know the fact that that I said I was an architect was what actually amazed them more than saying that you are preaching, you are an Islamic preacher. So they were more amazed at you being an architect. Whoa, you speak English language? So it's not even the Arabic language. They're not even, appreciating the fact that, oh, someone can read the Quran, someone can read the hadith of the Prophet.
So as long as you speak Arabic, as long as you're doing da'wah, you're considered as backward person.
So you have to speak English, and that is what is affecting us today. No. Now, if you, for example, a lot of scholars out there with knowledge, but because they don't speak the type of English we want to hear, maybe they are not as fluent as some people are, so we don't want to listen to them because Dankawiede, for example, permit me to use this word, is not civilized. It doesn't even know how to speak English language. But we are not talking about the knowledge that he has. Now, if we want to move forward as Muslims, wallahi, we have to take away pop culture from Islamic intellectual pursuit. We cannot appreciate intellectualism if we go with celebrity appeal. And that was what actually affected the Islamic civilization. That was the point of departure when the Spanish guys, the Cordobans in Spain, modern day part of Spain today, when the Muslims felt they have to imbibe certain culture that is alien to Islamic culture in order to fit in, they lost their Islam. Allah took away the glory from them. 800 years, they lost it.
Amazingly, I was going to come back to you to talk about how we can draw a balance when it comes to Islamic culture and our culture. And Mohammed, back to you. Penabdul made a very important statement when it comes to imitating. And we've imitated a lot of people today. And amazingly today, Penabdul was trying to portray the point before I got him, where he was like saying we want to look or perhaps talk like the other people around us, the Western and likes of it. But when it comes to Islamic knowledge today, people don't even know the difference between who is a scholar and who has memorized what a particular sheikh has said in a lecture. And you find that a lot of amazing young people today go into imitation. It's exactly what the sheikh said in his lecture. They'll come and offload. So they take it in and come and offload to you. So what's your take on this, and how can we curtail this?
Interesting.
Okay, if I understand what you said, were you talking about how you can't differentiate from people who know and those who do, and
yeah.
Can you hear? Okay. Well, I think what Penabdul said, I got some few points out of it. Look, the culture of Islam is a very open religion. I think one of the reasons why Islam has been very successful at being preserved you can still read books that were written over 1,000 years ago and understand what they're saying and actually feel a certain sense of appeal towards it. It's because Islam is an open religion that allowed freedom of thought, as long as there isn't anything harmful to humanity, because that would go against the maqasid of Sharia. So for instance, I know the world has moved so far away. Like personally, I can say that is true of Penabdul, that he wears his robes and his cap all the time, and that's how I dress all the time, almost all the time. But you see, Islam doesn't dictate how you should look, right? Islam doesn't dictate what you should eat. Islam doesn't dictate how you should speak. Just speak well. But Arabic is the language of the Sharia. Arabic is and I think one of the, I don't believe in conspiracies. I think one of the, I believe a few, perhaps, but generally speaking, I don't believe in them. But one of the conspiracies that I can somewhat understand and maybe agree with is that, the whole Western machine decided to take out Islam from the Muslim lands and, replace it with their culture. One of the first things they did was remove the language, right? Give them, as he said, pop culture. I've read so many books like The Lords, and one of them was actually Winston Churchill said something to that effect, that we could use music and our new inventions to kind of make the Muslims a bit gentler, whatever. I mean, these are very condescending things, but Islam is open to cultures in the sense that a Somali person can be Somali and Muslim, a Nigerian person can be Nigerian and Muslim. And I think one of the things we've lost as Nigerians is we have failed to promote ourselves as what we are, and we are looking to other people so that, this is a personal thing. I've seen, exactly. I've seen people in England wearing the dish dash over their head, and they're just causing problems for themselves. And I'm telling them, like, look, this is not the dress of Islam, right? Even if people say it, Islam doesn't dictate. If you're in Nigeria, you can wear babariga. If you're anywhere, as long as you don't wear something immodest. So I think Muslims have felt, as rightly said by Penabdul, this pressure of maybe is it inferiority complex, or they feel like other cultures are condescending onto them, so they have to kind of live up to the standard of the West. They have to speak like them. They have to, and these are not necessarily damning as long as you use these tools, perhaps from the West, to do good things. But if you malign your own culture and try to push Islam through the lenses of other people, you could end up being an extremist where you are. People might dislike you. So I think Muslims have to kind of, respect themselves wherever they are, imbibe, and stop believing in these conspiracies. I think for people that believe in all these conspiracies, everything is against the Muslim, well, I think we should try and look at root causes of problem. Some people will come on Yawm al-Qiyamah and they would say to Allah that we've been, that the malaika would ask them, Fima kuntum, why are you in this state? And they would say, Kunna mustad'afina fil ard. We were weakened, we were oppressed on the earth. And then the reply will be, Alam takun ardullahi wasi'atun fatuhajiru fiha. Isn't the earth of Allah vast enough for you to make hijrah? In other words, you don't have to subject yourself to other people's oppression or thoughts or systems. You can, as Muslims, we're not people of ideology, we're people of Sharia. We can accept ideas as long as they are in line with the Sharia, but we will throw away those that are not in line with our Sharia, even if they are alluring or they sound good or whatever. But we can see the danger, and that's why we need deep, philosophical thinkers, people that can see beyond what other people see, so they can give you a deeper analysis of whatever it is you're looking at. And I think this is, for me, I think a lot of a part of what the Muslims have missed, and we're just sleeping. There's a line of poetry where the poet said, وَعَاشَ قَوْمٌ وَهُمْ فِي النَّاسِ أَمْوَاتُ, right? People, you see them, they're leaving, but they're as good as dead. تحسبهم أيقاظا وهم رقود. You think they're awake, but they're asleep because we're not thinking and we're allowing other people to think for us. And a perfect example of how people can take over systems is, and I'll stop here. When the internet was created, people didn't really, in the early 90s, people didn't think it was a big deal. Yes, it's strong enough. It's a good machine. Is it going to be as effective as people are saying? Well, we don't know. There are a lot of people that have those technological analyses of what it was. But when these young people came, like Zuckerberg and the Twitter people, they took the internet and they're ruling it, right? Google, these people, they went to their garages and created things that are now entirely, shaping and moving the world, and they get to sell information. They know where you are right now. They can control what we see and what we don't see, and things like that. So Muslims have to understand that these aren't conspiracies. They are actually doing it. So if we're not going to do anything, I think we should just keep quiet and continue watching Arewa TV. No offense. Shouldn't have said that, but I did.
I want to add to something there. Amazingly, yeah, you made mention of, for example, the dressing of a particular group of Muslims versus some other Muslims. And at this point, I think it is very important for us to understand one important thing here. I'm trying to create a dichotomy between the two, wherein we're going to merge them together. Now, pay attention. We have the Islamic culture and the Muslim culture. The Islamic culture and the Muslim culture. Now, let me explain what I mean by this. The Islamic culture, for example, the dressing of a Muslim. How should a Muslim dress, male or female? That's an Islamic culture. The Islamic culture says the minimum, cover your aura. For the male, we know. For the female, we know. We're not going to fake here. That is Islamic culture. The Islamic culture is cover your private parts, cover your aura, what has been defined in the Sharia. What then is the Muslim culture here? The Muslim culture with regards to dressing differs. The Islamic culture is one, the Muslim culture differs. We have understood Islamic culture with respect to dressing, cover your aura. Now, the Muslim culture here is, if you go to Saudi Arabia, in Saudi, the Muslim culture there is for the Muslims to wear the long jalabia, isn't it? That is the Muslim culture there in Saudi. In Nigeria, if you come to the northern part of the country, what is the Muslim culture? The Muslim culture is to wear this type of clothes, and we're not to wear shirt and t-shirt. Am I communicating? If you go to India, you will find that the Muslims dress in a particular way. That is the Muslim culture, which means they fulfill the basic requirement of covering their aura. And the Muslims are known for that dressing in that particular area. And that is why when you go to a particular area, that this is us putting our intellect into, into work. If you go to a particular area, you are used to dressing with t-shirt and trousers in your area. Perhaps it's nothing. Even the Muslims dress like that in your region. Then you come to a complete, entirely different region where that dressing, the t-shirt and three-quarter trousers, is exclusively worn by the non-Muslims. Then you have to ask for the Muslim cultures there. Now you have fulfilled the Islamic culture. It is not haram if you put your t-shirt and your trousers. But in order to be known, you have to now ask for the Muslim culture there. How do the Muslims of this environment dress? That if you see this dressing, you know this is for a Muslim. Then now you know the difference between the Islamic culture and the Muslim culture. And that is why in Saudi, the shuyukh, they put on this. Here, we put on babariga when you are doing khutbah. So it is somehow funny, with all apologies, to see you living in Nigeria and you are dressing like Sudanese and you are moving around, you know, subhanallah.
Penabdul, Sultan, I think he said it's from idiocy and stupidity to differentiate your clothing with the people when you're living amongst them.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what he said.
Several times, yeah. Imam Mawardi made mention of it. It is idiocy to start coming out now that no. So please, we need to understand that, and we need to appreciate that the Izzah, Umar bin Khattab, radiallahu anhu, Umar bin Khattab, you know, like Abdullah bin Mas'ud, he said, ما زلنا عزة منذ Islam Umar, radiallahu anhu. He said, we are perpetually progressing ever since Umar bin Khattab accepted Islam. That this is the confession of Abdullah bin Mas'ud. He said, we perpetually were ever on the increase. Mundu Islam Umar, from the moment Umar accepted Islam. But look, listen to what Umar bin Khattab said. Umar said, we are a people that have been honored. We're a people. Now we have to rejoin. Okay. Now, we're a people that have been honored by Islam. Izzah. Inna al-izzata lillahi wa li-rasuli wa lil-mu'minin lakinna al-munafiqina la yafqahun. Izzah, honor belongs to Allah, His Messenger, and the believers. So whatever honor you are seeking for, superiority lies in sticking to Islamic culture. So Umar bin Khattab, he said, we were honored by Allah. If we seek for honor from other than Islam, we are going to be debased. And that is what is happening to the Muslims today. The Muslims are faced with the backlash of backwardness because we started looking for honor elsewhere. We thought Islam is not honorable enough. So we have to dress like some people before we can be seen as civilized. We have to speak like some people before we can be seen as civilized. We have to subject our logic and intellectual to that pattern that some people brought without any recourse to Islamic principles before we can be seen as intellectuals. So this, you know, seeking for honor from outside Islam is actually what has led to our disrepute and the state that we find ourselves in today. So, and let us not lose focus on what we are talking about of this
exactly,
yes.
Penabdul and Abdallah, let us not digress. How can some of the knowledge compiled by our previous scholars be made widely available? Because these are knowledge we guys are talking about, that these are knowledge that has already been worked on properly, and subhanAllah, these are things that have not been done before. So how can we make these widely available?
Muhammad, Bismillah first.
How can we make what widely available? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Knowledge of the previous scholars.
I think it's available. I think part of the reason why people fail, I've spoken to so many people, like I know some intelligent people that have studied chemistry, they have first class in whatever they do, but then they find it difficult to sit through a fiqh class or a class of usul, because I think they don't have access to the language. That's one thing. If you don't have access to a language, you find it difficult to learn complex issues in the language. So you can't teach people maqasid al-sharia in Arabic, and it's not going to be easy, even if you do, right? You have to teach them in Arabic. That's my point. So if you can't teach them in Arabic, then you know you would lose a lot of things. So part of the problem is our inability, perhaps, to learn Arabic at a very early age. I think this was one of the things that we've lost because of the diversity of Islam. And this is, I think, to a point, it's not the fault of the Muslim. You see, it's not wajib, even though Ibn Taymiyyah says it's wajib for every Muslim to understand the Quran through Arabic, but it's impossible. Let's just say it, right? in our day and age, it's not happening. Majority of Muslims don't speak Arabic. So we don't want to say like they're in a state of sin or something like that. But I feel Muslims can still get access. I've met so many great people that don't speak Arabic and have a very, very firm grasp of their religion. And it's very, it's really, I hope it's not being recorded by the authorities. Again, what was my point? I've lost my chain of thought. Yeah, so well, basically what I'm trying to say is you don't have to learn Arabic to have a good understanding of your religion, but it makes it worth the while if you do. So these things are available. I think the curriculum of our schools are not entirely Islamic. They're not pushing towards any kind of reform. It's not like our curriculum are very boisterous in changing people's mindsets. I think that, you know, I can say this because I'm in the education sector. I'm actually a class teacher. So these curriculums don't work. I've met so many teachers that have to improvise, and these are good teachers. They have to kind of bring in new forms of ideas, you know, modernity into the whole curricular structure to kind of impact the student. That is, I think we have to look at it from an educational point of view. We're not too prone to education in the North. I think we've lost it. We used to be. The leveling, we have children that aren't doing well. And I think one of the things one of my very good friend, actually a nephew, said was, it's quite interesting that when Muslims from the North are going to study something, maybe in another country or whatever, they always go for this business courses or, you know, just sociology, something very, I'm not saying they're not important. I'm a big fan of social sciences, actually. I love Ibn Khaldun. I think he's one of those tools that can help us solve our current problem, because he is perhaps the father of sociology, as they rightly call him in the West. But I think Muslims have to raise their bar to feel challenged. This is what's happened in this Scandinavian countries that are well far ahead of us, and even ahead of countries like England and of course United States have lost it rather poorly in the last 10 years. I mean, they're always behind on the test scores and all that, but Muslims have to raise their bar. We have to imbibe in our children the love of complicated you know, sciences, so complicated problems. Because before I think the last thing I would say is I totally agree with what Einstein said in one of his books, which is kind of an autobiographical account of his life, The World as I See It. He said, to solve a complex problem, you have to come with a more complex brain to the problem, because if you don't, you're just going to give the same analysis you see on the TV channels or other people just blabbing about it, perhaps. And nothing is done. So you have to kind of bring a complex set of ideas to solve complex problems. And this is,
you know, Subhanallah, before you comment, I want to ask this question. We talked about the glory days of how Islam did a lot of intellectual stuff and likes of it. So we live in a world today whereby everyone or a lot of people do not consider Islam as a forward-thinking religion, unfortunately. So my question is this to you, Penabdul: why is it that the Muslim world considered almost all the time, you know, as a backward nation?
Okay, inshallah, before I answer that, I in my thoughts, I wanted to add to what Muhammad Abdallah said earlier. You know, the cited example with the Scandinavian nations and how far they are ahead of other even popular nations. Now, for the Muslims, we have a competitive advantage over the Scandinavian nations. Now, I'm talking from the moral point of view now. Yeah, with the advancement in technology, social science, and advancement in everything and means of livelihood that you find in the Scandinavian nations, unfortunately, they top the list in immorality. They are morally bankrupt. On one side, they excel in the dunya aspect. On the other side, they also top the list when it comes to modern bankruptcy. Now, why did I say the Muslims have a competitive advantage? Now, the Muslims have the advantage of creating a balance between the two. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Qasas, وَبِتَجِ فِي مَا آتَاكَ اللَّهُ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا وَأَحْسِنْ كَمَا أَحْسَنَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكَ. Now, this is instructive. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us a formula to creating a balance between materialism and spirituality. Now, seek for that which Allah has given to you, the abode of hereafter, but do not forget your legitimate share of enjoyment of the life of this world. This is a Quranic verse, Quran chapter 28, verse 77. Now, when you look at the other parts of the world, they only know the outward appearance of this world and they excel in it. But we, the Muslims, we are given the opportunity to know the outward appearance of this world, as well as to imbibe the spiritual culture of learning about the Sharia. So we have two things, but the Islamic Sharia says the most important knowledge is the knowledge of Sharia first, then other knowledge that have a relationship with it. So we, the Muslims, have a competitive advantage. That was what I wanted to chip in with respect to that. Then the other issue that you have rightly put with regards to Arabic language, amazingly so, and I don't want anyone to misunderstand what my brother said, that you don't have to learn Arabic language to understand Islam. No, it's not, it's like he rightfully said, it is not going to happen that every Muslim understands Arabic to such an extent that every Muslim picks up the Quran, he reads the Quran, he ponders over the meanings of the Quran, and he gets affected by the meanings of the Quran, and it pulls him into action. No, you need some people. You need some people to be grounded in Arabic language so that they can decipher those things that have been kept in the books written by the scholars that came before us, so that these people can take the manuscripts, break them down to the language of the people they're living with, and explain to them. If I read something in the Arabic language and I explain it to you in the English language, knowledge is knowledge. The aim is for you to understand it. So I mustn't teach it to you in Arabic language. As long as I'm translating it and explaining it in accordance with the meaning that it gives, then it serves the purpose. The purpose is for people to understand. So for a few, it is very important for them to understand Arabic language. Otherwise, this knowledge that has been kept in Islamic.
So what you're saying, it's a fardul kifaya, right?
Fardul kifaya is not wajib on everyone to learn Arabic language, because you can understand the deen from those that understand Arabic language without you understanding Arabic language. And I think one of the efforts that some of these great scholars, even our contemporary scholars, are doing is to translate these books that have been written in Arabic language into various languages so that people can have access to this knowledge that has been kept. We understand that in translation, some meanings are lost, but at least people get to understand the fundamental of the message, and that is what is important. So that is that. Then back to the question that you raised, Sheikh Shuren, please remind me again the line of thought is.
Why is a Muslim world considered almost?
Okay, now I'm going to be a bit radical here, and I hope nobody's going to arrest me afterwards. Now, I will not, because I've said it in one of my Usul Thalatha classes 3 years ago. I've said this, and the video is all out there, though it was in Arabic language, so I'm not afraid to repeat it again. Now, the Muslim world, nobody should be sentimental here. I hate sentiments when it comes to intellectual discussions regarding religion, and someone is trying to say, no, but Islam, no. The Muslim world of today neglected the fact that the earlier Muslims excelled also in the fields of science. So they restricted knowledge amongst the populace to the knowledge of the Sharia alone. In some places, excelling deep in the knowledge of science becomes problematic. So because of this emphasis only on the knowledge of Sharia, remember, Sheikh Fawzan bin Fawzan in the Sharh, in the commentary of Usul al-Thalatha, in the very first statement of Sheikh Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab, when he said, "A'lam rahimakallah, annahu yajibu ala kulli muslimin." It is compulsory upon every Muslim to learn 4 things. And he said, the first one, al-ilmu. Al-ilmu, wa huwa ma'rifatullah wa ma'rifatu nabiy wa ma'rifatu din al-Islam bil-adillah. Sheikh Fawzan bin Fawzan, in explaining this, he said, al-ilm, yes, is the knowledge of Sharia. But the knowledge of mathematics, the knowledge of engineering, the knowledge of architecture, the knowledge of social sciences, knowledge of what medicine, whatever, he said it becomes obligatory if the Muslim Ummah are in need of that knowledge. Now, when we shift our focus away from that, then other people picked it. And we need it to survive. Today, we need this technology. Look at it, we're having this live session under a lockdown situation, but a lot of people have been reached out. So we need this knowledge also to be able to perfect the other one that is obligatory upon us. So when we relegate this knowledge to the tail end, what happened? The Muslims started retrogressing, because now we have to depend on others. Now, when we depend on others, these others, mark my words, these others in most cases are not Muslims. Because the Muslims now do not pay attention to this type of knowledge now, science, technology, and others. So we're only graduating PhD students from Sharia, PhD students in Hadith, PhD students in Quran, PhD students in this and that. But we have little people to match others in terms of science and technology. So now what happens? The PhD Muslim doctor in Sharia, in Hadith, in Fiqh, in Aqidah, in this, now has to depend on that Christian scientist and software engineer to develop a software for him to use. What happens? On a larger scale, if the Muslim nations now have to depend on non-Muslim nations for weapons, for example, defense weapons and all the things, what happens? And I'm not going to mention countries so that I will not be banned, from entering. What happens? You are dictated to. You are dictated to. So with your Sharia, the one that has advanced in science and technology now dictates to you, and now at the end of the day, you now water down on Sharia rulings to get aid from people that have advanced in science and technology. Look at Iran, for example. Iran, it's a Shiite government. But because of this ideology of advancing also in worldly technology, so the Iranians today, the Iranian scientists today are competing with the other scientists of the world in terms of nuclear development, for example. So they are forced to reckon with. Why? Because you have this in international law, you have what is called MAD, the law of MAD. MAD, yes, MAD, not MAD. MAD, mutually assured destruction. Google it. Mutually assured destruction. You have nuclear weapon, I have nuclear weapon. If you bomb me, I bomb you. So there is peace in the world. If Allah not checked one group of people with another group of people, the world would have been in turmoil. So Iran today, because they have this nuclear technology, the international community is recognizing the existence of Iranian government. So they dictate to them, they say, well, no, we are not going to take your dictates. Mind you, we are talking about this now. But when you look at the other aspects, with apology, the Sunni world now, you see us, they don't bring us to table to discuss nuclear. They don't bring us to table to start discussing advancement in science and this and that. And when I've just unpacked it at the international level, bring it down to the local level in Nigerian context. Today, largely the Muslims in the northern part of the country is largely Muslim population. We have Muslims in all other parts of the country, but largely the Muslim North are the majority. But again, where you have the majority Muslims, when you look at the poverty indices, when you look at the illiteracy level, we top the list. We top the list. Why? Because we don't even understand the religion. Why? Because now we believe that all other knowledge, science, technology, engineering, they are not important to us. We are only focused on akhirah. And this is a misunderstanding of the religion. And as a result, we will not take our children to Western to go and learn in. Mind you, chemistry is not a Western education. Physics is not a Western education. Biology is not a Western education. Astrology is not a Western education. Oceanography is not a Western education. You're just learning it with the colonial master's language. So you think is the knowledge of the British people. Before the British people, the Muslims excelled in it. They learned it using Arabic language. So the earlier we understand this, the better for us. Because the hatred that some of us, that some of the people in our communities have for Western culture has led them to even hate anything that comes in English language. So any knowledge that is being taught in English language, they see it as the enemy's language. Subhanallah. So we have been denied a lot of things. And now our own language, we have not written books in our own local dialects discussing those things that have been discussed in English language, in Arabic language, in French. So now what happens? We now face this backwardness. We don't want to learn physics. We don't want to learn chemistry. We don't want to do. I remember when internet came, though I was a bit younger, if we go to internet cafe, they look at you as a sinful individual. Where are you going to? I'm going to the internet cafe, and I'm talking about early 2000s, 2001, 2002. You go to internet cafe, they see you as someone that is sinful. What are you doing on the internet? And this was the mentality, and the same mentality we're having today whenever any new technology comes. I remember when Facebook came, you had scholars that said, don't go to Facebook. Yes, they had their reasons because of the evil. But again, let me give you off the book statistics. 90% of what you have on the internet is positive. Only 10% of it is negative. Unfortunately, 90% of the internet users, they go for the 10% evil, and only 10% of the internet users go for the 90%. Good content. So the overwhelming presence of the negative users that go for the 10% thing is now making people to see evil in all of these things. But look at it, we're discussing Islam using these platforms. And I think the earlier we get this mentality out of our head, the better for us. And that will enable us to start thinking for ourselves, to start advancing in technology and to look beyond the present. And for the Muslims of yesteryears had foresight. And that is what we lack today. Foresight, the ability to sit down and analyze issues and understand where the problems are. Like he rightfully said, Hadi made, an intellectual exercise trying to understand the Al-Majri issue. That is how a Muslim thinks. You have to have foresight. You have to look beyond now. What's going to happen in the next 10, 20 years? That was what I said when I was comparing Iran, the Shiite government and the Sunni government. That was just what I said. Foresight, in the next 20 years, the Shiites are going to take over if you don't wake up. And that became like a prophecy. And a lot of people were like, but it was a simple analysis. We have to have this foresight. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna fi khalqi samawati wal ardi wa ikhtilafi al-layli wal nahari la ayatin li ulil albab. Alladhina li ulil albab. Let me not go forward.
Penabdul, we keep talking, we're not getting whatever.
And you have pushed me to that. I've gone to that stage now that I'm looking for it.
We will have to go back to this inshallah after Ramadan. Muhammad Abdallah, just I have a lot of questions and I'll just take a few, and inshallah we try to end the lives so that others can go have their iftar. My next question to you, Imam Abdallah, is how does ideology affect our intellectual pursuit today as Muslims?
Okay. I have a headache from what Penabdul was saying. I think he has said so many things that are very deep, and yeah. So I would relate it to that. I mean, ideology. So you see, there's a big problem when you talk about our concepts or our perception of what education is. I think it's still taking the North a long time to realize that the train has left the station. Perhaps we have to trek to the next station, maybe if we can catch it, because it's moving so fast and we're not even running. My point here is, as Penabdul said, we have had a lot of people, unfortunately attack the system of modern education. So we found it difficult to catch up. And wallahi, I just checked the Q&A section. A brother wrote something, or sister, I didn't check, but very, very, very important. The colonialization of the Muslim world is definitely an issue here. The industrialization age, when things were changing, the Muslims couldn't catch up. And I actually read in a book that I can't remember the title, which talked about this problem. So the world has industrialized and has moved forward. It's no more an agrarian society. Nobody talks about how to use your cutlass or your digger or whatever to farm. We're talking about, we're now talking about deeper things, like people turning 1 hectare into a huge space for farming. And so the Muslims didn't have that opportunity to catch up. It was a big problem, and still is. We didn't catch up as early as we could. And it's still a problem, because if you go to Egypt, and I've seen this, there's a clash between the traditionalists who think all this industrialization moving forward is a curse, and the more modernists who think, oh look, we need to move on. Life has moved on. We need to standardize things. We need to raise the bar. So there's still this struggle, and it's happening in Nigeria. There's a group of people that feel I'm also sorry to say that it might sound controversial. They feel like the scholars, may Allah have mercy on them, are not raising the issues. They're not talking about the problems. They're not solving the complex matters. We're only talking about marriage, how to be a good husband, how to be a good wife. It's always how to be a good wife. No, come on. We want to learn how to change the system. So ideologies are important. The scholars also have to understand these things. I mean, even for Rudud basis, to make rebuttals, right? Scholars need to understand what is the crux of feminism. Why is it on the rise? I'm not saying insult them or abuse them. No, study it. See why it's happening. Understand the issues. Look at a big matter like capitalism. People say, oh, he's a capitalist, and they think it's an insult. But what is capitalism? What's wrong with it? Take the bad things out and use the good apples, right? That's what, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Always look at things like that. There's something that I learned when I was studying. It's also an ideology, functionalism. So functionalism is the idea that you should always look at the functionality of things. There's no point sending your kids to study. Okay, let me rephrase before I am. I always have this problem when people think I'm too controversial, right?
Abdul, I will trade for the with insult. Don't worry, you are not on Twitter.
Alhamdulillah, I'm not on it. Yes, and wallahi, one of the reasons why I can't do Twitter is I always forget my password, so I don't feel. Yeah. So my point is, we always feel like for Islam it has to do with only the Islamic the sources, right? Learning the Quran and the Sunnah. That's true. That's the primary. That's the basis. Is the usul. Now upon it, there are the furu'. You have to understand the context. What time are you living in? Wallahi, last week I picked up, I got a collection of Uthman ibn Fodio's books, and I opened them, and there were 3 volumes of his combined collected works. I was reading a letter he wrote to the women of Katsina, and I was like, I was so shocked by what he was saying. It was like he's leaving right now with us and seeing the same thing that's happening. And I felt like this guy is going to because he was talking to the woman as if, he wasn't even, how scholars, when they talk about issues, they refer to people, even when they're talking about, say they're talking to the woman, they talk in the masculine form, right? With Mandam Fodio was talking in the feminine gender form. And it was so impactful. I had to write out my status. I think women should maybe read these things and think about their life from that point of view. And this is not me just talking about women. I think men should also read books about how to change their lives. So in general, I think ideology is what I learned and what I believe as a Muslim is most of them are wrong. Most ideas that have caught up to the world didn't really succeed. You can talk about Marxism, you can talk about Nazism, you can talk about all the romanticism, in the age of enlightenment, the mistakes they have made, the blunders, where people, there's an age where the age of enlightenment came and crashed the romantic idea that emotions are the most important. But in so doing, they damaged the world by saying, look, don't care about emotions, just be enlightened. So it's the age of reason. You could say, yes, it led to the industrialization of the world, but I think Muslims should always look at the human costs. This is the difference between Muslims and I wouldn't say non-Muslim, some of them, laysu sawa. Allah says they're not all the same, but there's the Western ideal is that we should produce more cheaper so that people can consume and profits can be made, turnover, right? So it's always about money. And unfortunately, they don't produce in their countries. They go to all these weak countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, and they make all these young Muslim kids and, producing your Nike sweat, whatever you're wearing. And this is the problem. That's the problem of capitalism. But the Muslim is always aware of the spiritual aspects of things, right? What is the cost, the spiritual cost of me doing this? Is it going to make some people lose their iman, right? And this is where we talk about ethics. This is why Muslims should also have a voice in technology. Don't think that Facebook is perfect. Don't think that these things are neutral. I think if you read enough books, I've read so many books on the social media, internet, and technology as a whole, and my understanding is these things are no more neutral. And we've talked about this with Penabdul on a panel maybe 2-3 years ago, I can't remember, that it's no more neutral. It's no more like a knife that you can cut things with or you could stab somebody with. It's not the same. These things are designed to influence your behavior. They're designed to keep you glued. And when that's happening, you're not reading tafsir, you're not reading hadith, you're not reading fiqh, you're not. So you find all these Muslims addicted to the social media. And this is one of the reasons why I don't do it. I don't tell people not to do it because I don't know why they're doing it. They have their reasons, alhamdulillah. And maybe they're very important. They're like my beloved friend Penabdul. I would hate to see him get off it. But there are so many people that you would wish they're not on that thing, right? Because they're causing havoc. They're saying things that they shouldn't say. And it's all because of different ideologies that people have that they cannot align it or juxtapose it with the Sharia to see whether it's going to work from an Islamic perspective or not. Because it sounds intelligent, I might as well just say it so that my followers can feed off it and that people can praise me and say I'm an intelligent person. So I think most Muslims should always count the costs, the spiritual cost of things, and don't be swayed by ideas because the person who proposed the ideology or whatever it is eloquent, or he looks very good, or he has shown you some results that are quite fascinating. I think you should look deeper at all these movements that are happening, especially when it comes to the technology, because when you're using your smartphone or your computer, whatever, if you don't have the capacity to read through these things, and Penabdul can confirm, a lot of the Islamic searches you do on the internet actually takes you to Shia sites. Yeah. And I actually read a CIA report, which was declassified last year, that the Iranian government actually paid Google a huge sum of money for advertising their site, so that in the Middle East, in West Africa, precisely West Africa, and Nigeria was one of those countries where these sites are actually pushed up so that the me and you that are searching things online can get search results from Shia perspectives without us knowing. And they always have this sites, Muslim forward, Muslim this. So you don't see the Shia elements, but it's actually there in the text. So I think ideologies are very dangerous if Muslims don't understand them. And it can easily take you out of the fold without you realizing, thinking is Gayu, is modernity, is a trending thing. So I think we should be very careful. وَاحْتَصَمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. These are times of fitna, and fitna is enticing. Lastly, I think there's a poem that I really like. الصحابة كانوا يتمثلون عند الفتنة بهذا الشعر from Imro al-Qais, that the narrator said that the Sahaba used to make a mithal with this poem during the times of fitna, people like Abdallah bin Umar, and they will quote Imro al-Qais, and that's to show you that you can quote a non-Muslim to make a valid point, because انظروا إلى ما قال ولا تنظروا إلى من قال. Look at what's being said and not who said it. So he said, الحرب أول ما تكون فتية تسعى بزينتها بكل جحول حتى إذا اشتعلت وشب ضرامها ولت عجوزا غير ذات حليل شمطاء ينكر لونها وتغيرت مكروهة للشم والتقبيل. This means that at the beginning, all these things, all these war type things that take you out and lands you into fitna, it appears to you as a beautiful girl. Right? تسعى بزينتها لكل جهول. She takes every ignoramus with her. Everyone that has no ilm, no foresight thinks, oh, this is a beautiful girl, I must fall in love with her. حتى إذا اشتعرت وشب ضرامها, when she brings out her real color, the fitna begins to come out. We begin to see the negativity. ولت عجوزا غير ذات حليل. She becomes like a poor lady. Nobody can marry her. شمطاء ينكر لونها وتغيرت. Her color changes and everything, even her hair, right? She becomes really ugly, right? مكروهة للشم والتقبيل. You can't hug or kiss her anymore, but she has taken you to ruin. So I think young people, we should be very clear on this matters.
MashaAllah, tabarakallah. I wish we can continue with this discussion. It's already 6, subhanAllah. I think this is a discussion that we have to continue even after Ramadan. And just before we end the session, as you all know, Penabdul Muhammad, subhanAllah, this is the last class for the month of Ramadan. And just like, we started this as a joke, we're going to start it and perhaps take some few small classes and likes of it. So I want to ask you just a question to you, Muhammad, and also you, Penabdul, as well. And I'll start with Penabdul. Subhanallah, how have you seen these classes that we've taken throughout the month of Ramadan? Do you think it's a good thing? And do you think it's something that, even after Ramadan, we have to put a lot of effort to continue?
Yeah, I think, alhamdulillah, it's a noble effort. Earlier, I was on the phone with Muhammad Abdallah, and I said, at least, anyone that got the opportunity to participate in most of the Zoom meetings will now understand how complex knowledge is and how important it is to seek for it and how dangerous it is to speak without knowledge. So I think if I'm going to use this to round up my comment also, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I have this poetry of Imam Shafi'i in his diwan that I wanted to share with respect to knowledge seeking. One of the dangers that we have today is that people speak beyond that which they have acquired knowledge of, and the end of it is danger. So there is no way you will enjoy knowledge without seeking for knowledge. There is no way you will be able to engage yourself in an intellectual discussion without having knowledge. To this end, I have this poem of Imam Shafi'i regarding those students of knowledge to seek for knowledge. He said, "Ishbir ala murril jafa min mu'allimi fa inna rasub al-ilmi fi nafaratihi." He said, persevere patiently in the harshness of the teacher. Yes, the teacher is too tough, is too harsh, is too this and that. He said, "Ashbir ala murril jafa min mu'allimi fa inna rasub al-ilmi fi nafaratihi." That knowledge that you are seeking for, it's hidden in the harshness of your scholar. Then Imam Shafi'i said, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَذُقْ مُرَّ التَّعَلُّمِ سَاعَةً تَذَرَّعُ ظُلَّ الْجَهْلِ طُولَ حَيَاتِهِ. Imam Shafi'i said, whoever will not bear the bitter taste of sitting down to seek for knowledge for 1 hour, it will lay under the shade and shadow of ignorance throughout his life. So you have to humble yourself before a teacher to learn. Otherwise, you always go out with the flag of ignorance. Then Imam Shafi'i continues, he said, وَمَنْ فَاتَهُ التَّعْلِيمُ وَقْتَ شَبَابِهِ. He said, whoever has knowledge taken away from him during his young age, he said, فَكَبِّرْ عَلَيْهِ أَرْبَعَ لِوَفَاتِهِ. Say Allahu Akbar 4 times because the person is already dead. وَذَاتُ الْفَتَى وَاللَّهِ بِالْعِلْمِ وَالتُّقَى إِذَا لَمْ يَكُونَ لَا اعْتِبَارَ بِذَاتِهِ. He said, the essence of a young person is by knowledge and taqwa. If he does not have knowledge and he does not have taqwa, لا اعتبار بذاته, there is nothing to use in expressing his essence. He's nobody. And I end with this. I hope this will encourage all of us to seek for knowledge for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sincerely so that Allah will bless the knowledge that we have sought, and it will be as means of benefit for us in this world and in the hereafter, and for the general Muslim. So you seek for knowledge for the sake of Allah, not to be seen as a scholar and not to argue with people, but you do that seeking for the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you do it, you're seeking for the face of your Lord, and Allah will be pleased with you also, as he was pleased with Abu Bakr bin Abi Quhafa. I end with this, and I leave the rest of the statement to my brother Muhammad Abdallah. May Allah subhanahu all of you, and may Allah bless Did You Know Academy. This double, subhanallah, you don't know the good you have done. You only ask Allah to accept it from you. If Allah accepts it, you never know the reward that will come afterwards. Subhanakallah, alhamdulillah, la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
Yeah, Muhammad.
Amin ya Rab. So for me, I won't take a lot of time because it's over. But for me, this is a bit emotional, because I remember when we sat down in Abuja thinking of how to run a course, which is a free course for at least 40 to 50 people. Am I right, Shuraim? And we did all the logistics, and we were calculating the iftar and how many people are going to come, so that we can do a long time till Maghrib. And alhamdulillah, it wasn't possible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that we're all going to stay home and become zombies on Zoom. And this happened, so to me, it's a big deal, because perhaps, you don't know the plans of Allah. So sometimes just ask for the khair. And this is perhaps the best thing that we could have done. I think this, for me, it's one of the most deepest Ramadan. Astaghfirullah, but yeah, it's alhamdulillah, this is good, and I hope we do more with barakallah fikum wa akhiri da'wana anil hamdulillah. May Allah make this beneficial for everyone. Jazakumullah khair. And those that are suffering in their homes, may Allah bring ease for them. Those who don't have the to feed their families without venturing out, may Allah. Salam alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Muhammad, jazakallah khair. Subhanallah. I'm really excited as well, and we got a lot of comments from a lot of amazing people, and how this class has been beneficial. And this was something that we didn't plan very well or how to go about it. So that's something that, perhaps just get a few of our friends and our peers to get to learn the deen, myself, Abdullah, and the likes of it, just learn the deen in the month of Ramadan. Alhamdulillah, it has gone wide and within, and popular benefiting, and we hope that this will be something even after Ramadan. I want to thank each and every one who has been participating in this program. those who have supported us morally, those who are, always asking how are the class going. Subhanallah, it's been amazing, it's been great, and it's an experience that I myself I really learned a lot from. And every time we have classes, we have Sheikh Asma Hakim. Sheikh Asma Hakim will be like, Subhanallah, he talks about issues that we don't even know about. So we ask Allah that He makes it easy for us. We ask Allah that He blesses us. And inshallah, further details will be sent to the WhatsApp group. Jazakumullah khairan to each and every one of you. Penabdul, thank you so much for coming. And Muhammad Abdallah, Jazakumullah.
Sorry, I think, thank you very much. Jazakumullah khair. I think this should be a continuous thing. I think you shouldn't stop. And I think, as you said, those brothers that behind the scenes that are working day and night for this to happen, raising money to pay for the webinar is very expensive. These things have been done by people that you might not even know their name, but please put them in your dua. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. And Shuraim, good job. Barakallah feek. Sometimes you're not giving due credit. Penabdul is right there in your studio. It's very beautiful. And may Allah bless your endeavors and raise your status. And of course, all of us that are part of this and all the Muslims anywhere they are, those that are suffering and those that are not suffering.
Ameen ya Rab. Ameen ya Rab. Jazakumullah khairan wa barakallahu feek. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa